The year is 1982, and a tragedy has occurred at the Schofield Army Base in Hawaii. The son of an officer is found deceased below ground in a bunker by one Thomas Spindle. Upon investigation, Spindle recalls the names of 3 fellow soldiers as his alibi witnesses, one of which is a man named Clifford Hubbard. The inclusion of Hubbard in this group is a strange one, as he had no prior affiliation with Spindle. The only commonalities between the two being the fact that they were stationed on the same base together. Another of the 3 soldiers, Joseph Courtney, confirmed that he was in fact present at the crime scene. Upon questioning, however, he provided 6 different recollections of what had occurred. It was based on this wishy-washy testimony that both Spindle and Hubbard were charged. When the time came for the trial, 2 of the 4 soldiers involved never attended the courthouse, leaving only Spindle and Hubbard present. Disregarding the absence of these 2, the trial proceeded. The usage of Courtney's testimony was deemed valid despite the fact that he was not present to give it. Now, as backwards as that may seem, it doesn't hold a candle to what's to come. In order to link Hubbard to Spindle in this case, the prosecutor claimed that the analysis of one hair belonging to Spindle and found in the laundry bag of Hubbard was sufficient to create this connection. You may ask yourself, why would analyzing the DNA found in a hair be problematic in a trial? Well, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the crux of the injustice that took place in this trial. The hair in question was in fact not tested for DNA. DNA testing had not yet become widespread in crime analysis. So it was instead tested using microscopic hair analysis. During an investigation conducted by the FBI, it was concluded that out of 28 hair analysis cases analyzed, 26 of them contained either testimonial or scientific errors. This is an alarming statistic, not only calling into question the integrity of criminal forensics, but the validity of Hubbard's conviction. And yes, he was convicted. To make matters worse, petitions to retroactively provide and test evidence for DNA analysis were denied on the grounds of a technicality preventing military offenders from accessing federal privileges, which we will discuss later. At the age of 20, Hubbard's prospects as a private in the military were crushed as he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On this episode of the Innocence Podcast, we'll be taking a look at Hubbard's multifaceted case, the reliance on junk science in his trial, and the injustice therein. Joining me today is one of the directors of the Hawaii Innocence Project, Professor Ken Lawson. And so I just want to know, first off, what your impression of this case is. Just summarize it, maybe 1 to 2 sentences, what your thoughts are, especially in comparison to other cases you've worked with.
Yeah, well, that's the point. I did criminal law and criminal defense for almost 20 years before I came here to Hawaii, right? All kind of cases, from traffic tickets all the way to death penalty. I've never seen a case where someone has been convicted on such flimsy evidence, and that, and they're actually innocent. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they spend 40 years of your life in prison. When Hubbard went to prison, I was just graduating from high school. Right, so we're almost the same age. He went to the service. I went on to college. But yeah.
He was convicted at 20 years old.
Yeah.
So he's spent almost double his life outside of prison within.
Right.
Which is, that's just more egregious than anything I can think of.
Well,
right?
40 years in prison is a long time, even if you're guilty.
Certainly.
Right? Now think about it when you're actually innocent. And you have to kind of wonder, when you get one life to live, and you kind of question those of us that believe in God, like, why is it that I'm sitting in here in prison with the only one life that I have for 40 years for a crime I didn't commit? You know what I mean? It's pretty serious stuff.
So, as far as the checks and balances, what do you think went wrong most in this case? Was it the jury? Was it the prosecution?
That's a good question. When you look at our system, right, we do have the best system in the world, I believe, the jury system. However, this case and others like it throughout our nation shows that the innocent can go to prison for crimes that they did not commit.
For a very long time as well.
For a very long, actually there have been some cases where people were executed. They were actually innocent, right? Which is the ultimate punishment. True. And so when you ask about what went wrong, I just think it's on astronomical levels, right? When you can have an informant like Courtney, where you can give them a deal, right? We know that you're in trouble. We think that you're a suspect, but right, we're going to make you a witness. We're not going to charge you, what have you.
So can you go into a little bit more detail on that? Because that's not on the website at all. All it said was that he had 6 different versions of this testimony, but there was no explanation of any kind of deal he received. Can you go a little bit more into that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like implicit with respect to he was a suspect initially, right? And in part because of the lies he was telling.
Of course.
So in order to divert attention from him, the prosecutor and the investigating officers had to make a conscious decision that we're no longer going to focus on you if you give us somebody else. And if you look at it, Courtney told 6 or 7 different stories, right? But he came to court one day. Let me back up. So if you get charged with a crime in our state system and in the Army system, in the military, they have what they call like a probable cause hearing, right? So in other words, in order for me to hold you for a crime, a felony, the state has to show, or the military has to show, that there's probable cause that a felony was committed, murder. There's probable cause that you committed that felony. If the judge finds those 2 things, and he can hold you, or she can hold you, and then you get what they call bound over to a grand jury, and the grand jury indicts. So at this type of hearing in the military, is called an Article 32 hearing. And so Courtney, and what happens is the government has to bring in their witnesses to testify in front of the judge. You know, why do you have this man charged? What's your evidence? So Courtney is there to testify that Hubbard was involved in this, right? This is like his 6th time coming or giving a statement, but first time coming to court. So when he comes in there, the first day he says they didn't do anything, right? They weren't involved. Then he gets threatened because he's already told other stories.
Right.
So the judge says to the prosecutor, you know, and the prosecutor tells Courtney, we're going to have read you your rights, because you can be charged with a crime for perjury or lying and all this other stuff. So then they tell him, go back, we're going to get you a lawyer, because now if you continue to do these things, you may be charged with a crime. The next day he comes back, he's so scared that he goes ahead and tells the story. He implicates Hubbard and them again. I don't know why Jane's calling me now. Anyway. So yeah, and so the point is that right before the trial, he absconds, he being Courtney, and where the body was found at, in one of these bunkers, there was a palm print found above the body. That palm print belonged to this other soldier named Hanson, who was friends with Courtney.
And he never showed up to court, did he?
He and Courtney both went AWOL together the day before trial.
Now, how can the trial continue with that being the case? I don't understand that.
Well, now, underneath the new law, it wouldn't, right? A case called Crawford. You have the right to confront it's a constitutional right. If somebody's accusing you of a crime, the Constitution says that you have a right to confront them, right? To confront witnesses against you. It's a 6th Amendment right. And so what does that mean? Confrontation means you have a right to cross-examine those people accusing you of a crime.
Naturally.
Back in 82, all you had to do was when Courtney came to that Article 32 hearing you and I were just talking about, where he first testified, they weren't involved, then the judge said, okay, we're going to get you a lawyer because now you could be in trouble for changing your story. Next day, Courtney comes back after being threatened with being prosecuted himself. Now all of a sudden remembers again that Hubbard's involved. All that's on transcripts. Right, that's transcribed because it was in court. So when he and Hanson when he being Courtney and Hanson escape, that transcript from that testimony gets read into Hubbard's trial.
Oh, okay.
Right? How does it get read in? Well, instead of you seeing Courtney on the stand, like you're videotaping this, right? So instead of you seeing Courtney testify, if you're the jury, and right that way you can evaluate. You know, some people when they talk, you can tell they're kind of lying. It's like, man, that guy look like he's lying. You know what I mean? Shit like that, right? in this case, what happens is the prosecutor, one of the other prosecutors, it's like several prosecutors, gets to pretend to be Courtney, right? And so then he takes a stand and then just reads what Courtney had already said
Just
from
on
the
behalf of
transcript.
him?
From the transcript, right?
Right,
So he's
okay.
reading from the transcript, everything verbatim. So now that statement goes into evidence against Hubbard.
As though it were him himself testifying.
And so it's right. And so when the jury is looking at the prosecutor who's dressed in a suit, nice, handsome young man, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're seeing in their minds Courtney.
Right.
Then they get to see the same guy prosecuting who was playing Courtney argue other things in the court. I don't know if this is making any sense, but
sure.
Right? And so when you're a prosecutor that's allowed to do that, a jury already believes that they're credible.
Mm-hmm.
They're prosecuting the case.
Yeah.
Right? So the jury trusts them. So now when you're playing Courtney, it's hard for the jury to determine, okay, well, this is the same prosecutor who I trust.
Yeah. And they're displaying this confidence,
Yeah.
this professionalism, articulation. It all adds up.
Yeah. But nevertheless, you still have Courtney telling several different stories, and then goes AWOL.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the judge didn't even continue Hubbard's case to at least try to go catch Courtney, right? Or say, okay, you know what? We're going to continue this for another month to see if we can find him and catch him and bring him into court.
So I had a question for you at the end, but I'd like to just, since we're on the topic already, just wanted to go over it. So this case is obviously a very brutal crime, right, that was committed. Do you think that severity had anything to do with pressure to convict? Do you think that they maybe wanted to jump to some conclusions on this one because it was so just heinous? Do you think that was a factor in this?
Oh, yeah. I think the publicity surrounding it, and that's not uncommon in this case, when the public is asking for blood, when there's been a very sympathetic victim that was subject to
a child,
a brutal crime. But if you really look at this case, Tanner, one question that we're raising here is, was it murder? If you look at the young man had asthma really, really bad. Right. And so there's really no evidence. If you look at the doctor's report, the coroner's report that did the autopsy, there's really no evidence of any strangulation. In other words, people with bad asthma can die from it. There's evidence that he was having an asthma attack at the bowling alley he was at before he was found, the next day.
Right.
And so if he had an asthma attack and people panicked and then left him there, right? Because there was no evidence of any sexual assault. Right? So the question is, did he die from murder? That's one question. That's not even here or there.
So you said there's no evidence of sexual assault, but within the case files themselves, sodomy was mentioned.
The sodomy was charged. That's because, so the body is at the bottom of the bunker. So you got stairs going down into the bunker, right? And so the body's at the bottom of the bunkers, and the pants are down. Right? But so apparently people believe, well, his pants are down, so there must have been a sexual assault. Right? But there was no physical evidence of it. None. No penetration, no sperm.
Did they do any kind of rape kit on this?
Yeah, they did, an examination and everything to determine if there was a sexual assault. There was no physical evidence, medically, of a sexual assault other than the pants being down. You follow me? And so then if you don't have any, strangulation marks or anything like that.
Bruising or anything.
Right? And you have somebody who has extremely bad asthma that was having an asthma attack. Where's the evidence that it was even a homicide?
That's a good point.
As opposed to, 14-year-old kid has an asthma attack. We're not supposed to be out here. We being other military people, whoever was there that night. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so then they just leave his ass. Yeah. Right? Kind of shove him down the bunker, whatever. I don't know. Right? That's the whole point. We really don't know exactly what happened because the only one who's telling us what happened was Courtney.
And he's gone.
And he's told 6 different or 7 different stories. Right?
Right.
So you don't know. But anyway, getting back to it. When you look at Courtney's statement, and here was the problem is that Courtney implicates Spindle, the co-defendant of Hubbard. When Spindle gets interviewed, he says, look, I got an alibi. Well, actually, Spindle, let me back up. Spindle is the one who finds the body. So he claims he goes back and reports it. So they ask Spindle, where were you at that night? He says, I was in the bunkers. Who can verify that? Well, Courtney saw me, and I think Clifford Hubbard saw me. Now, Spindle and Hubbard aren't friends. They just don't hang out with each other or anything like that. So that's how they interview Courtney. So they start talking to Courtney. And Courtney's already had a long list of just drug charges and stuff like that while in the military. So
really?
He was right. Yeah, oh yeah, he was always in trouble. Right. In fact, he's supposed to be on house arrest at that point. So anyway, that's when Courtney first says, he doesn't know anything about it, etc. And then when they go back to him a day or two later, in his other statements that he's made subsequent to that, he starts changing his story, right? Because they start saying that he's lying about things he has said. So instead of to take their attention off of him, he starts talking about Spindle and Hubbard. Now, because Spindle and Hubbard weren't friends, the government had to try to show how they linked. Why would these two guys, who everybody that we've interviewed from that barracks says these guys don't hang out together, how do we connect them? So what they claim is that they went through the laundry, I believe it was Spindle's or Hubbard's laundry.
I believe it was Hubbard's laundry
bag.
And found Spindle's hair.
Well, they claim they found...
right.
They claim they found this hair, right? So there's a laundry bag in the barracks that belongs to Hubbard. They look at it, and they pull out this thing, and they like this, similar to hair or carpet fibers or dog hair, whatever the hell you want to call it, right? And they claim that hair belongs to Spindle. Now, they all use the same washer and dryer facilities, etc. They're all in the same barracks, right? And that's their physical connection that they try to use to connect these two to the murder of this victim, right? So it's not a hair found at the crime scene. It's not a hair found on Hubbard at the crime. It's in a laundry bag at the barracks where they should have. And so they, and what microscopic hair analysis is, you've seen it on like CSI where there's a piece of hair found on the victim's body, right? The criminalist, he picks it up, bags it, and tags it, right? Mm-hmm. Then they take it back to the lab and they get the suspect's hair, a sample from the suspect's head. They put it in a microscope and they say, it's a match. The hair from the suspect's head matches the hair that we took off the body, right?
Now, what are they analyzing in this case?
Well, it's just voodoo.
Color? Oh, it's just...
Yeah, what they're analyzing is just they're trying to show that based on, when they magnify it way up, that these two hairs are similar, that they belong to one person. The FBI's already come out over the last 10 years ago or more saying that this is just junk science.
Yeah, I did see something about that.
Yeah,
actually.
Microscopic hair analysis is no longer admissible evidence in any case because it's not science.
I see here that 74 of 329 wrongful convictions within like a set of data were overturned by DNA evidence that were involving faulty hair evidence.
Right.
So that alone is pretty alarming.
Well, because there have been cases where professionals have testified that carpet fiber found on the victim's body was human hair, or that animal hair found on the human body was human hair. And people have been convicted on that.
Now, how long was this a common practice before it was debunked, essentially?
In the early 2000s, it was debunked.
Oh, my goodness.
So it's been existing since then. And people think it's true now.
Yeah.
Most people think that, you can do that you can take the hair off of a victim's body, take a sample from a suspect, look underneath a microscope and say it's a match.
Is this kind of the same pseudoscience involved with like bite analysis, that kind of thing?
Same thing.
Okay.
Same thing, right? And all of it's just junk. Right? But the public doesn't know that because, see, what we want answers. We want to know, give us an answer. Give us some evidence that shows that we know that this guy did it.
Right.
And so if you put somebody on the witness stand in a white coat that looks like a scientist to start testifying about big microscopes and hairs matching all that other stuff, he or she sounds credible.
Now, my question is, how are these cases, these crimes, not being expunged immediately upon the realization that the science used to convict is just bogus?
Well, because so in a lot of cases, if you don't have the hair that was used because you back then a lot of, like in Hubbard's case, there was no DNA testing procedures available to test the hair to show that it's not my hair or it's not Spindle's hair or whoever's hair, right? Now you can use DNA to test the hair if you have enough of a hair sample. But there's other cases to where what the courts are saying is, even if it was microscopic hair analysis used to help get you convicted, if there was other evidence, eyewitness testimony, whatever, then you may not walk free. So what the courts have to look at, Tanner, is let's take away the hair evidence. Let's say all that's just junk. We move it out. Is there sufficient evidence left after we take out the hair where a jury could have convicted you, right? What is it? Videotape of you committing the crime. There's 10 witnesses saw you. You confessed, etc. So even though the microscopic hair analysis is junk, there's still enough evidence to convict you.
There's some other factors there.
But that's not this.
Right.
Right? That's not this. This is, one, the hair, even if there was a match, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, even if DNA came back and said,
the chances of a coincidence are just way too high, right?
Yeah. Well, how does that mean? I mean, you and I committed a murder together, right? How? It's just crazy. But nevertheless, that's just, and so there's witness after witness that testify. These two guys don't know each other. They don't hang out together. So why would they be out by a bunker hanging out all of a sudden and engage in this type of criminal act? It doesn't make any sense.
I wouldn't call that probable cause.
Right.
Yeah. So, on to like Hubbard's experience in and of itself, especially in prison. I can't imagine the feelings of betrayal that he holds, especially for like his country. I mean, he was a military individual, right?
Yeah.
Serving his country, and here he is being treated basically like a second-class citizen.
Right.
I mean, I can't imagine the way he feels towards the government at this moment. And I was reading some of the documents sent to me by Jennifer here, and I read that what mail he does correspond with is written on pieces of toilet paper and newspaper, and I was just wondering whether or not prisons are required to grant resources for that kind of thing. Aren't they?
No, so you may get a certain amount of, depending on where you're at, right? Maybe a couple of stamps each month and a certain amount of paper. After that, you're done. So if you don't have family members putting money on your books, or if for whatever reason you don't have a job while you're in prison, you're broke.
Right. And on the topic of family members, I mean, all of his family is either deceased or no longer contacts him. Yeah. Which is, I mean,
and so what you end up doing in order to survive in there is you start trading things. Just right. So sometimes he's traded his food to get paper. Other times he's written us on paper bags, toilet paper. You know what I mean? Whatever he can to communicate. And so you can see the mental deterioration. Like you said, he's a kid. He's 20 years old. I mean, in most states, you're not even old enough to drink. Right? We don't trust you, and we don't trust your judgment to the extent where we won't allow you to decide if you can drink or not. And that's right. So you're still a kid to a certain extent. Your brain hasn't been fully developed, but yet we're going to take you at that young age, right? And now, he's in his 60s.
He's institutionalized.
But can you imagine the mental deterioration that you had to go through?
So I can imagine, but right, I can't.
So when you talk to him, you can kind of tell. You know what I mean? I mean, he's still lucid. He still has a good memory, right? Very, very intelligent,
sharp.
But you know what I mean? You can tell that he's been institutionalized. Right.
It just seems like an inevitability at that point.
Right. I mean, he's never had a cell phone. Probably doesn't know how to go through a fast food drive-through. I mean, And just strictly, I mean, you know what I mean?
He's lost 40 years of time entirely.
Yeah, I mean, the internet, I mean, come on. All the things that we take for granted.
Yeah.
Right, and definitely. When you see all the changes in society that's happened since 1982 till now.
I can't imagine. I also saw that he's written hundreds, it said, letters to pro bono attorneys and stuff like that. So I imagine what resources he does have, he spends a lot on that. But do you think that a pro bono attorney would be hesitant to take a case like this just because of the severity? And I mean, it just seems like the progress is so slow.
Well, before he came to us, he wrote all. He no longer does that because we decided to take his case. But yeah, once you run through the system, you're not entitled to an appointed lawyer anymore after you've been convicted and after you've had your first appeal. So after that, you're on your own. Right. So, if you can't afford a lawyer, one will be provided for you. You know, those Miranda rights that you hear on TV, right? That's at the trial stage. Then if you get convicted, you get an appointed lawyer for one appeal. That's it. You lose that appeal, you're on your own, right? For the rest of the time you're in. And so, these guys have to write tons of letters and beg people to represent them. Right. And most people, when they see it, it's like, everybody in prison says they're innocent.
Yeah.
Watch that, you got boxes of material you want me to read for what? And you don't have no money? Oh, no, I'm not,
Yeah.
Right? You must have done something.
Certainly.
Right? You had a jury trial? Military charge you? Oh, come on, man. You know what I mean? And that's the attitude with a lot of people. And this is the reason why, projects like ours exist.
Right.
And which makes it it's not only necessary, but it allows us to teach these students that like I tell my students all the time, I can teach you the law all day long, but I can't teach you is justice. Right? See, justice is a matter of the heart. Justice is something that you feel when you read this case and something inside you that says, you know what, this is just wrong. And you can't put your finger on it. You can't find it in the book. But man, this is unjust, right? And so, excuse me for getting emotional, but
no.
When you read this stuff, like I said, I've been doing this for years, man. This is the reason why I started doing it, right? To fight for those that couldn't fight for themselves. When you read this stuff, what we try to teach the students here is how to care. Because see, if I don't care for Hubbard, why should a judge?
Right.
Right. If I don't care for Hubbard, why should a jury? Right. So if you're a lawyer and you get this case and you look at it and you're just like, well, I got to sign this case. I'm just going to work on it. You know what I mean? Without caring one bit. That's going to show in the results.
Right.
You know what I mean? But when you start reading and you start working on it and you know that you're the only person because, like you said, he ain't got no more money. No other pro bono lawyers taking this case. So you know that you are the only thing that stands between him and his freedom. Right? You as a law student or whatever at the Innocence Project. And if you don't get it done, ain't nobody else going to do it. That should keep you up at night.
Yeah.
If you care.
Absolutely.
Right. Now, if you don't care, it ain't going to keep you up.
It seems like, the justice system lacks one critical component. That's empathy, right? I mean, we're going over these. I mean, for example, the prosecution, they shot down his petition to have his DNA sample tested, right? Under the guise of, or not the guise, but the grounds of it being a military offense as opposed to a federal offense.
Yeah, so what that means is, the government, Congress, passed a law a few years ago called the Innocence Protection Act. And what it says is anybody in the United States, in any state whatsoever, that brings a claim of actual innocence that they're in prison for, if they have things that can be tested through DNA, this act says that you have to test them. Right? So there has to be an actual innocence claim in any state by a U.S. citizen. So we tried to file that for Hubbard. And the government said, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. When we met any state for any citizen, oh, sorry, we weren't talking about the military. You thought we were talking about the military? No, it doesn't apply to the men and women who defend our country. So no, you got it wrong, man. And they were right. They're wrong for saying it, but they're right because for whatever reason, Congress didn't include the military in it. Right. And so we went all the way up to the Ninth Circuit, which is the Court of Appeals. And the Ninth Circuit said, you know what? It doesn't include the military, but it should have. And so all three judges from the Ninth Circuit said, you know what? There's nothing we can do. Right? We can't invent law. We interpret law. That's what judges do, right? Congress makes law. We have to determine, if this fits in the law. So since Congress made this law and they specifically didn't include military, we can't touch it. Mm-hmm. Separation of power and state, separations of powers, right? So you got the state, you got the legislature, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. The legislative branch is the one that creates the laws. The judicial branch looks at to make sure it's constitutional, right? And so since the legislature made this law, the judicial branch can't change it. The legislature has to change it. So that's what the court said. Look, we if we could change it, we would. We can't. But we think the legislature should.
Is there any kind of motions being...
So we're working with Senator Hirono and Senator Brian Schatz here from Hawaii, senators, U.S. senators, and others in the U.S. Senate to try to get it changed. So the military, because it makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
And I had another question regarding that. If this was a military offense, why was he in a federal prison as opposed to a military one?
Well, because most military, when they first get convicted, go to Fort Leavenworth, right? But there are a lot of military inmates in other federal prisons, so it's not unusual.
Okay.
It's not unusual.
And then I also saw he was transferred to 5 different federal prisons in the span of 2.5 years, 2 years?
That's punishment.
I don't want to try to interpret any kind of malice with the things going on here, but I don't know what other conclusions I'm supposed to draw from this.
So once you get to federal prison, you're out. The military has nothing else to do with you. It's the Bureau of Prisons, the Federal Bureau of Prisons, BOP. Mm-hmm. And so if you get in trouble there, what happens is they ship you out. So you could be, so before you get shipped out, you go to the hole. They call it protective custody. Then they transport you to your next, wherever prison that's going to be. You don't immediately get released into that prison general population. You go into the hole again. Right? For like 30 days or 60 days. Then you come out. Then if they want to really mess with you, they'll send you somewhere else again. And so you just, right? You just go, it really is. It's intentional punishment.
It's a vicious cycle.
Sure. It's done intentionally, right? Because, to punish people, because you never get to a spot, a prison, to where you can acclimate, get a routine,
get established,
get a job, etc.
Then maybe start advocating for yourself. They don't want you to do that.
Yeah, so they let you know if you want to start some shit at this prison again, right? We're going to send you for another couple of years all around the country.
And we'll destroy your personal and legal documents as you go.
Yeah.
What's up with that? What's going on there?
Same thing. Because what happens is once you get put to the hole, man, a lot of people lose their stuff.
Just out of coincidence, or are people destroying these things? I don't.
It depends on where you're at. So I can't speak personally. I don't know exactly what they did to Hubbard.
Do you think this is a product of just the scale of the prison system, as far as all these things kind of being swept under the rug? Do you think that it's just a problem with there's just too many things going on for everything to be enforced, everything to be above board?
Well, and I think too they have their own way of doing things, and again, people on the outside don't care. I mean, you're in prison. You know what I mean?
We don't even think about it.
Not only that, but most people think, you know what, you're in prison. What are you crying about?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's okay, you lost some papers. You know what I mean? What do you expect?
They probably have the attitude of you deserve it, right?
So my point is that when people don't care about what happens, then government's going to be slow to change what they've been doing.
Right.
Right? There's no, right? Because, again, you see it with police misconduct cases. Until you see George Floyd on videotape getting the life choked out of him with somebody's knee on his neck, people didn't care. Right? It took that video for a lot of people to say, you know what, even I, right, and right, those that would always pro law enforcement finally said, you know what, this in this case, this is wrong. But before then, it's just like, I don't care. When Kaepernick takes a knee as a San Francisco quarterback in protest of police brutality, he gets blasted. Why? The same thing with prisoners. You see what I mean? So,
yeah.
People, right? And so if I can go out and treat people like Hubbard with impunity, if I can go out and arrest people anytime that I want to and put a knee on somebody's neck, because the only thing that allows me to do that is who people are going to believe me, the officer.
Right.
People are going to believe me, the guard, the inmate guard. Why? Because people don't care about.
So there's
inmates.
a stigma attached to.
There's a stigma attached to prisoners,
criminals,
right? That allows this type of injustice to because no one cares enough to say,
right.
You know what, this needs to stop.
Well, the justice system seems to just take every human aspect out of an individual and just turn them into a number, right? I mean, that seems to be the common theme.
Well, not right, and so the question becomes, where's the rehabilitation, et cetera?
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't want to get too far adrift, but. So, when you're dealing with that type of stuff, in other words, the lessons they're trying to teach Hubbard is don't make any noise while you're in here. Do your time, shut up, stop complaining, and you'll be fine. You start complaining about conditions in the prison system, you start talking about you need your legal documents and all that, you start creating a problem for us, the guards, we're going to create something for you. Right?
Certainly. Yeah. Let's see. So, self-advocacy is obviously a necessity for Hubbard, for a lot of people that are wrongfully convicted. I mean, how viable is that approach? Because I was reading that he, while in Florida, which I believe he's still in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
the prisons, they don't have the resources to access Hawaii files. The clerks are not trained in any kind of military procedure on accessing these case files. It seems like self-advocacy is just an almost futile process.
It's almost a futile process, but it's one where, like I said, when you get into prison, you have to find a routine. And I'm speaking from one that's been to prison, so I know what I'm talking about. So when you go to prison, you find a routine, and if that routine is in investing in your case and trying to investigate your case, even with the lack of resources, you're going to try to do whatever it is you can. But to your point, it's limited. And so it may not be that viable, but you don't have a choice. Right? If you want to at least have some type of routine that keeps you mentally stable, right? Because the worst thing you can do while you're in there is to do nothing, right? To just have time, right? And so when you get guys like Hubbard, when I was locked up, there were guys that just had boxes of this stuff. And they just, every day, they would just carry it all to the law library, spend all day in there doing whatever they was doing. But they're fighting like hell to try to get out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't imagine holding on to hope for that long, really, is what I'm thinking, is that at a certain point, I wouldn't be holding my breath.
But you never know, Tanner. You know, I mean, some guys may, try to check out. I don't know, but you never know what you're capable of until you're put in those types of situation, right? Till that adversity hits. And so without that hope, what are you going to do?
So, as far as people who are released after false conviction, I know that sometimes the government will give a monetary payout. Are there any, resources or programs provided by the government for people who are released after that?
Yeah, see, that's a good question. So, like, if you are guilty and you come out, you're on parole or probation or supervised release, meaning what? You have to get an ID. You have to get a job. They help you get a job. If you need counseling, you get counseling. If you need places to live and housing, you go to a halfway house. You know what I mean? Till you can get on your feet again. If you're actually innocent, and of course, there's one day, oh my God, this DNA shows that you didn't do it. We got to let you out now.
Yeah.
Right? And you've been in there for 40 years and you don't know how to get housing. You have no idea what the fuck the driver's license looks like because you don't know how to drive.
Yeah.
Right? How do I get a state ID and I don't have a Social Security card? Who's going to show me how to do that? Well, when you get found actually innocent, they just tell you goodbye at the door. Here's your personal belongings. Good luck. That's it.
Not only does that leave someone financially destitute, they have no tools to interact with the outside world, right?
Right.
That's what institutionalization is this complete separation from the rest of society. And it almost seems like it's on purpose.
It's on purpose, and there are a lot of guys who don't want to come out.
Right.
Right, because that routine becomes something that is their life.
Well, that's all you know.
It's all you know, and you become comfortable with it, right? Because you don't have no worries. You don't have the stress of losing a job. You don't have the stress of not having enough money for a vacation. You don't have any of those stresses that normal people have on the outside. And so some individuals are okay like that because they become institutionalized.
It almost breeds complacency.
Yeah. Right? Because again, in order to get through there, you're either going to obey these rules or you're going to find yourself in the hole. So you find yourself even unwillingly becoming programmed in that type of system.
Right. Well, with all that being said, what are the next steps for Hubbard, his counsel? What are we looking at here?
Well, hopefully, we're going to try to lobby the president and the military to at least give him a pardon or clemency. Because even if you're guilty of this type of crime, I've done murder cases, first degree murder cases, where people 20 years plus 3 years for if they use a gun, 23 years, right? And they're out. 40 years in prison for a crime that even they believe is not intentional murder, right? So even if they believe that Hubbard did this, no one said that he went there to murder this kid. You follow what I'm saying? So it's not a first degree murder case. Right. But it's still even if it was, it's still too much time.
Just seems like if you were to show this to anybody with the power to release him, they would just do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping. Yeah. And that's what we're hoping. And even the Court of Appeals, when they made the ruling about the Innocence Protection Act and why it should include the military, even they said, this is a case that kind of cries for why DNA testing should be done for the military, right? It's not like you got a guilty person here, who needs help. You got somebody that's been in prison for 40 years on this evidence. Just no, which is no evidence.
Right.
That's just it. Some guy tells 6 or 7 different stories, goes AWOL the night before trial, and a piece of hair that the FBI says is just voodoo, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in prison for 40 years on that. You have no other witness putting me there. You have no confession, right? You have no fingerprints. You have no other physical evidence. None. Just the word of this guy who told you 6 or 7 different stories, and I had to go to prison for that. And he runs away.
Do you think this happens a lot and it's just not published or public information?
I think wrongful convictions happen more than of actual innocent people happen more than what we think.
Yeah.
But a case like this, no.
Right. This is.
Like I said, I did some serious cases. I represented some famous people. I've never seen anything like this. Never. And all the cases that we have, this one just screams. I mean, all of them scream for justice, but this one is just like, this is just crazy. Right. And the fact that no matter where he goes, his hands are tied. Right. So there's no evidence, right, that we can find to test right now. Government says you're not entitled to the Innocence Protection Act. And you're looking at, and everybody knows he shouldn't have been convicted in the first place, but there's nothing.
It's obvious.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, to kind of conclude here, just wondering what the best ways are for like the general public to kind of aid in the fight against wrongful conviction, even with Hubbard's case specifically. Is there a website?
Yeah. But I don't know that it's the Hawaii Innocence Project website. If you just Google Hawaii Innocence Project, our website will come up, and you can donate there. You can send us letters that we can send to the U.S. Legislature and the Senate for his freedom.
And the donations are going towards
investigations of the case, the students' time trying to gather evidence, if we can still gather evidence, going to Washington, D.C. to lobby Congress to help us overturn his conviction. But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those cases to where out of all of them, you just kind of want to make sure you see it all the way through.
Definitely.
But the hard part about that is with no new evidence, only hope is for a presidential pardon or clemency or military clemency. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Other than that,
limited options.
Very limited.
Very limited.
Yeah, because Courtney's dead. He died in prison in Ohio.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, Courtney ended up in prison in Ohio for drugs. Ended up dying there. And so he can't come back in and say, yeah, But again, I can't speak for Courtney, but I think the only when he came to court that first time for that Article 32 and told the judge they didn't do it, I think he was telling the truth. Well, I know he was. And then they said, well, basically, we're going to get you a lawyer because you've already implicated him. So now you're changing your testimony. It means I can charge you. And you can go to prison. So think about it for a day. So then the next day he comes back in and says, well, on second thought they were involved, right? And so then the day that he's supposed to testify against him, he escapes with the other guy whose palm print is found above the body in the barracks and in the bunker. So the guy with the palm print found above the body and the guy who's lying both leave the island. AWOL. Right? And they continue to try, and instead of stopping the trial, saying, well, let's investigate this. Let's wait to see. Why are we in a hurry? Why can't we continue this for 3 or 4 months? See if you can catch Courtney. Right? Track him down. It's only been a day.
Right.
Right? And we can just continue the case. What's the area convicting Mr. Hubbard?
On that topic, just once more here, the son or the child in question here was the son of a military, like a high-ranking military individual.
Yeah.
Do you think that had anything to do?
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with it. Right. He was a high-ranking officer, one of the highest-ranking officers at the military base, is my understanding. Right, and so the publicity behind that, et cetera, and making sure that we get justice for our own, swift, fast justice, to me took paramount over justice. right? So that swift, fast justice can never be justice when you have evidence like this and people are going AWOL who you already had suspected. So you don't have no physical evidence that Hubbard was at the scene, but you got a palm print of a guy that's with Courtney, their friends, that was at the scene, and they go AWOL. Right? And so when you know that the defense is going to probably, so if I'm Hanson, that's the guy whose palm print was found, and I know that, you know what, this trial's starting tomorrow, and the defense lawyers for Hubbard, they're going to be pointing the finger at me because it's my palm print that's up there. And, you know, I may get called to testify. So, you know what, Courtney, I'm with you. Let's go.
Get out of there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for your time, Ken.
No, anytime, Ken.
Excellent conversation. I hope that this gives some kind of perspective, some kind of humanization in regards to Hubbard and just people who are wrongfully incarcerated in general. I mean, the stories on the website, the Hawaii Innocence Project website, are harrowing. Hubbard's in specific was just mind-boggling.
Yeah. But thanks for doing it. I hope a lot of people
absolutely.
listen to this.
As do I.
And get the word out. Because all that matters, right? And again, if you look throughout the nation when it comes to people about to get put to death in death penalty states, and you see the letters that get written to the governors and stuff like that, it makes a difference when people show the government that they care about a person. And so when you look at a case of an innocent man like Hubbard, right, and you doing this podcast, and if it can reach as many people as possible, that starts writing into Congress saying, hey, you know, there's an innocent man who served our country, who's been in prison for 40 years. We've heard his story. You know, do something to get him out. If we get enough people to do that, right, justice can happen.
Certainly.
Right. Sometimes it may not happen through the court, but it can happen through our public, through what you're doing, through this podcast. So thanks for doing it.
Absolutely. I want to thank the audience for listening, and see you on the next one.